Okay, let's get started and let's jump in. We can't wait for this incredible conversation with Jade Cochran. I'll be introducing her in just a moment. But today we have a really special conversation on pushing forward for gender equality in honor of Women's History Month, where we couldn't be more thrilled to have her and that she was able to make time for us in her busy schedule. As we know, there's a lot of like, upcoming exciting events coming up in the next few weeks. But welcome to today's session. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank the Center for Leadership and Global Impact and the UB School of Management for hosting us today. My name is Celine Curzan. I am a facilitator for the Center for Leadership and Global Impact, as well as a professor of entrepreneurship here at the School of Management. And I'm thrilled that I get to host these conversations with leaders, not only from Western New York, but from across the world. And today we're bringing you a very, very special guest. Now, before we jump in, we just want to give you a couple quick reminders. The first reminder is you can ask any question you'd like to Jade by logging into our Q&A session. So you'll see at the bottom of your screen, it's highlighted and circled here. You can drop a Q&A question in there at any time. We save some time at the end to be able to ask some audience questions. So we're so thrilled, and please feel free to join us and ask any questions that you have for Jade throughout our time together. And now, without further ado, I'm thrilled to introduce to you Jade Cochran. Jade is a program specialist at UN Women, where she leads the organization's global push forward strategy. Her work focuses on responding to rising backlash and rollbacks on gender equality by amplifying impactful strategies and supporting leaders to navigate complex environments. She also oversees UN Women's effort to strengthen accountability and protection for women human rights defenders and to build constructive partnerships between institutions and communities to increase civic space. Jade has worked with government leaders, UN teams, and nonprofit organizations across Africa, Asia, Europe, the Pacific, the Caribbean, and the United States. She previously researched women's leadership at the London School of Economics and helped develop a model on policy on preventing and addressing sexual harassment. She holds a master's degree in international human rights laws, and she spends winters weekends skiing with her children, whom their fearlessness continues to terrify her. I absolutely love your bio, Jade. We're so excited to have you. And Jade actually is going to be joining us this April in Buffalo, New York, for as one of our keynotes for our upcoming conference for the center. Welcome, Jade. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to join.
So, to get us started, could you share a little bit more about your role at UN Women and what led you to focus on this moment, particularly with growing challenges, especially as we see to equality and institutional progress?
Yeah, thank you so much. And also I want to start off by saying also happy Women's History Month. I was looking up the history of Women's History Month, and I learned that the United States has recognized it since 1987 to celebrate women's contributions to American history, and that it has that natural connection to International Women's Day, which is on the 8th of March. And for those of you that don't know, that is a day that grew out of early 20th century organizing by women workers in North America and Europe. So it's really fitting to have this conversation in this time period that we're in. And I thought that history also brings a fitting bridge to what's happening very soon in New York, where I am based with the United Nations. Next week, we'll see the beginning of the UN Commission on the Status of Women, also known by its initials CSW. And that is the UN's largest gathering of gender equality, bringing together government, civil society, nonprofits, private sector, and the UN system to really accelerate progress on gender equality. So to your question, so I work at UN Women, and UN Women serves as the UN system's lead entity on gender equality and also the secretariat to the CSW that I just mentioned. And our work focuses on translating global commitments into lived change, helping to shape laws and public institutions, supporting shifts in social norms, youth networks, the private sector, and UN partners. This is who we do that work together with. My own role is in the civil society division, where we convene and we connect civil society groups across regions to draw on their expertise, their insights to see that that informs policy discussions, global debates, and really catalyzes joint advocacy and action for gender equality. So you'd mentioned the push forward strategy that I am the lead for, helping with implementation of that at UN Women. And so that is a strategy that is very deliberately practical. in the context of gender backlash in which we're in, the aim is to spotlight and amplify solutions that are impactful, that are effective in advancing gender equality, in this context of global backlash. So we're looking into where communities and institutions are already working to advance this. So we can adapt those, scale those, help people be more aware of what's happening and what is working. So it's about surfacing what is effective and helping others learn from that. So why do we have this focus now? That's because the hard-won gains that we have long fought for over the many decades in gender equality are really under pressure right now. 1 in 4 countries report backlash against women's rights around the world. So a little bit about me. I'm a human rights lawyer by training, by academic training, and for the last 20 years or so, I've worked in gender equality and human rights with a little bit of community organizing thrown in. I've lived in 4 countries across 4 different continents, and across all regions that we see, the basic rights of women and girls are facing really unprecedented global threats worldwide, from higher rates of discrimination to weaker legal protections, less funding for programs and for institutions which support women and girls. So we're seeing this coordinated pushback against women's rights, shrinking civic space, and active rollbacks in law and in policy. So I have long held one of the most impactful things that a UN agency can do is to promote, support, and amplify those at the forefront to really ensure that civil society participation in decision making and to promote and protect civic space to see that they are able to contribute to the decisions that are impacting them. So civil society efforts, including nonprofits, universities, community groups, it's important to see that they contribute to addressing the challenges of inequality that they are faced. One piece of research that I often cite is that the most important and consistent factor for driving gender equality policy change is activism by community groups. And I'm happy to contribute my experience to help support those groups in doing so. And also that same research points to that where institutions weaken or where civic space narrows, gender equality becomes easier to contest and to reverse. So strengthening institutions and protecting those democratic safeguards are therefore essential not just for women's rights, but also for society's resilience more broadly. Um, so I was thinking, talking here to the UB Center for Leadership and Global Impact, that the threads running through these histories and those data sets really point to something quite practical that I thought we'd be speaking about today, that informed and values-driven collaborative leadership really does contribute and change outcomes. And so everybody present here today, I see you as part of that same continuum. What you do now, what you do next, and the skills that you are building now are really helping to shape those institutions and not just work within them.
Jade, what a fantastic start. This is going to be a great conversation. I'm thrilled to dive in. And you've started touching on a lot of different areas of how we're thinking about the global climate. So, can we dig a little bit more into that? From your vantage point, how would you describe the global climate right now? And I know you started to, but I'd love for you to expand on that a bit when it comes to how we think about gender equality, as well as the roles our institutions are playing, and we think about democratic resilience. And I know that's part of your role.
So, if we look honestly today at what's happening in the global landscape, I think it's fair to say that we're in a moment of really profound upheaval. I think many of us wake up to maddening news very often these days. Independent analyses show that 72% of the world's population now lives under some kind of autocratic rule. Autocracies outnumber democracies for the first time in about 2 decades. And civic space monitors report that a majority of the world's population lives in settings where freedoms are restricted and closed. These trends also show up inside institutions. So in many places, checks and balances are being weakened. Judicial independence is under strain, and essential space for civil society to organize and to contribute is narrowing. So in other words, the very institutions that protect rights and uphold accountability, they're being hollowed out. They're being often deliberately, and that limits their ability to hold the line when we need them to uphold and hold the line when our rights are coming under pressure. So how does gender equality fit within this? It sits directly within this picture. So we're seeing this organized backlash around women's rights that I alluded to. We're seeing backlash against women's opportunities, women's participation. And that isn't separate from democratic decline. The evidence shows us that evidence to restrict women's rights frequently appear in the cycle of democratic erosion. So attempts to limit women's autonomy, to silence voices, to roll back protections often accompany and can be seen to enable the weakening of wider democratic norms. At the same time, we can really see that there has been a lot of progress. Over the last few decades, women and girls have pushed for and have won rights and opportunities that were once seen as impossible. There's higher school enrollment. There are stronger laws on violence against women. There are fairer policies in workplaces. There's growing visibility of women in public life. And so this all shows what's possible when institutions and movements and evidence works together. However, it also does show how much remains at risk. So, according to UN data, not a single global indicator that we have in UN frameworks shows that gender equality is fully on track. There's not a place in the world where gender equality is on track. A girl born today, for example, in terms of current trends, she'll be 40 years old when we reach equal representation in parliaments around the world. She'll be 68 years old before child marriage ends around the world. And that same girl would be 137 years old before poverty is eradicated for women and girls and populations the world over. So all of this is taking against in a wider backdrop. So the head of the UN is the UN Secretary General, and he has described the current context that we're in very, very starkly. We're in a world facing conflict, impunity, equality, unpredictability, geopolitical divides, violations of international law, and huge cuts to the aid and the funding that supports the institutions and the organizations that we need for this work to continue going. So those forces are really shaking the foundation on which we work on. They're really shaking the foundations of what global cooperation that we want to see at the same time too. However, he gives us that stark picture, and he also tells us that disruption can be constructive. And I think that's something that we need to keep in mind. We're not passive observers of this moment. And this pushback on women's rights that I focus on, that I'm talking about today, is something that we are collectively not going to be allowing to stand. And there's work that we can do together for this. So again, I was thinking about the center here at UB, and I was thinking that the link to your work is clear from how I see it. The patterns that we're seeing, these democratic strains, institutional fragility, and the backlash, they point to a need to, across all sectors, for everywhere, agile cross-sector leadership. We need a world where people can understand systems, can navigate these differences, can bring together and prevent polarization, more inclusivity, work across cultures and disciplines, and help build coalitions in moments of uncertainty. And I thought, while I've given a very stark picture, I wanted to bring a hopeful part too, because we have to have hope, right? Even in the most difficult environments, all around the world, from how I see it, we have multiple actors are pushing forward. We have human rights defenders, we have youth movements, we have journalists, we have community leaders, we have researchers, public servants, partners in the private sector. Together and working in partnership, they are pushing forward by advancing nuanced and creative, locally grounded strategies to protect rights, to rebuild trust, and to strengthen our institutions. So this persistence shows us that progress is possible and that resilience isn't theoretical. And it's something that people can build every day with evidence, leadership, and collective action. So I hope that gives a kind of taste of the environment that we feel that we're working in here at the United Nations. It is one that is challenging, but it's one that shows us that there is work that's being done to advance gender equality in this context, and that's what we're looking to amplify.
Jade, those stats really do take your breath away for a moment when you hear them, right? A girl born today, it is shocking, and but it brings us to the work that you're doing, and the work that UN Women is really pushing forward, and specifically called, right, the Push Forward Strategy. So you highlighted it for us, but can you dig a little more into what Push Forward, what it really is designed to do, and what makes it different than past approaches?
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that. So really, at its core, the idea is that it's really a pragmatic observation, aware of this context in which we're in. So even amidst the most kind of political, the most difficult political and economic environments, communities and coalitions are doing good work that is advancing gender equality and pushing forward. And so what we see at UN Women is our task is to identify those practices that are taking place all over understand what is making them work and amplify them and give oxygen so that others in different contexts can see what is transferable to their context and what they might be able to do to replicate it in their own context as well. So that's what is making this strategy different from what we've seen before. It's also taking a very kind of proactive approach. We're aware of the big difficulties of the gender backlash that we see today. However, we're not taking this time to be defensive or to be reactive. It's about being proactive and saying, yes, this is happening, but let's look at what is working so that we can all coalesce around that, amplify that, and give that oxygen. So we're kind of translating and scaling proven practices where we're seeing impact, where we're seeing things that are effective, and we're being informed by evidence in doing so. So we're looking at where there are manifestations of backlash, and we're giving more attention to what is working. So we're elevating the innovations that are coming from communities that are navigating these complex contexts, and shifting the focus from, instead of what is being rolled back, to what is being built, and looking at the future, what is being done now and what can continue to be being done. There's a few things that we are seeing that are already working when we're with this lens. We see that strategic litigation and legal reform is one of the most effective tools for challenging the discrimination that we see, institutionalizing progressive gender norms and challenging harmful social norms. Strategic litigation has been really successful in contesting regressive laws, setting legal precedents, and advancing gender responsive policies. In contexts where those avenues remain open, we're really seeing that that's a way to kind of advance discriminate and overturn discriminatory legislation on things like discriminatory reproductive laws, workplace protections, and gender-based violence. We're also seeing the real importance of research, documentation, and analysis. Evidence-based advocacy is really critical for shaping public discourse, influencing policy, and countering misinformation. The more that we know, the more that we're better able to counter what we're seeing, and how to do so with ways that are working in ways that we know that work. So research institutions and research initiatives have been really instrumental in documenting the impact of the regressive policies on women and other marginalized communities. So this includes our analyses of how fiscal austerity measures are disproportionately harming women and girls, how digital disinformation campaigns are weaponized against those who are advocating for gender equality, and how legal rollbacks are affecting women's economic and political participation. We're seeing the strength of intergenerational mobilizing and organizing. We're seeing that is really crucial, that we are learning from different sectors. We're learning from what is working in climate. We're looking at what's working in public health. And we're seeing that if we look to each other's successes and we stand in solidarity with them, there's a lot that we can learn as we push forward together. Also looking at the labor movements, looking at different things in this area. And then another thing that we're seeing that works is that multi-stakeholder partnerships and alliances between governments, the UN, the private sector are really proving effective in sustaining that work going forward. So we see this is how it works. The push forward adds value by surfacing and codifying what works. We convene peers, we convene those who are wanting to be in solidarity with each other by seeing other things that are working. And we're brokering some support where needed to kind of connect movements and connecting those working, facing similar issues around the world. So again, why I was thinking how this links back to UB is that this leadership profile that you're growing here, like analytical leaders, collaborative leaders, global network leaders. I think there's a lot that can be connected here between what we're doing at the UN and how I can see that your leaders could be doing the same things in creating the systems that they want to see to have institutional resilience in the volatile world.
Wonderful. I love that connection to leadership and really putting it into practice. And when I was preparing for this conversation, I was looking at your LinkedIn, and you had reposted the Understanding Backlash Against Gender Equality brief. And I was looking through it, and I thought it was really fascinating how it highlights that power-based coalitions rooted in communities can be really powerful. And that's something that speaks to me and to the work we're doing here in Buffalo. So can you talk a little bit more about what does effective coalition building look like in practice? And especially when we think about working across sectors that might not always agree.
Yeah, we've really found that coalition building and coalition that are really rooted in local communities across different sectors is really what is very impactful for helping kind of hold the line against some of the pushback that we're seeing. So in terms of what does that look like in practice, I think it's really important to start from shared values, of which so many of us, our common humanity has that shared values, rather than look at our tribes or our identical ideologies. Strong coalitions really form around concrete commitments, such as we all believe in dignity, we believe in safety, we believe in fairness, we believe in participation. Even if we don't have full agreement on every detail that we're talking about, I think it's really important that we look at alliances that really are able to span movements, span professions, span communities, and that makes them more harder to polarize once we see how much more we have in common. And that makes us more capable of absorbing shocks when we're able to do so standing in solidarity with one another. I think it's important to design for inclusion and function. I think it's seen that coalitions work best when they build structures that distribute voice and decision making, making it clear who has which roles, what are transparent processes. I think it's important that people are made to feel part of what the coalition is doing. Be in solidarity with those who are being targeted, make those who are interested feeling part that they have a role to play here, why their voice matters, why their perspective matters, and why, again, it's so many decisions are being made about that impact our lives that it's so important to have participatory decision making, where if people can be part of that, if they feel that they can have their perspective can be brought into the decision making, the decisions that are made are going to be much more impactful because they're based on people's lived experiences.
And Jade, before I get to my last question for you, I would love to ask something that Jessica in the chat had asked. So she said, for women leaders navigating environments where progress can feel fragile or contested, how do you recommend staying strategic and resilient? And while thinking about burnout or pulling back, what would you recommend for a woman leader in that situation?
I think it's important to have your people. First of all, thanks so much for the question. I don't see the Q&A. Maddie did a very good job at the beginning of prepping me for this, but sorry, I'm not seeing the Q&As come up. But thank you for sharing that with me. I think it's really important to find your people, find those that you can speak to, find those that you can share challenges with. It's so important to brainstorm. It's so important to have communities of practice. It's one of the reasons I was so delighted to be able to join you all here today, is because I think there are so many workshops, there are so many policy papers that we can read that can be very influential, but do we have the time to keep that at the front of our mind? Do we have that to apply that more regularly? And so being in community with people who share your values, who can hold your back, who can encourage you, I think that is really important right now. I think it's also important to, in terms of you, because you mentioned burnout, I think it's important to know what you can do, to think about what is your sphere of influence, and to be very strong with your boundaries. It is not, nobody is able to do it all. And I think it's important to say, this is how much I'm able to do for this cause right now. And then this is also some stuff that I'm going to be able to do for me. I hope that speaks to the question.
Jade, that was fantastic. There is there's one more question. Um, what responsibility do you think established women leaders have in creating pathways for the next generation? That's a question from Robin.
What responsibilities do women have for helping those who come after?
Exactly.
Well, I think I'm pausing on the word on what responsibilities do we have. I think it is important that we do that. I think I'm somebody who has really benefited from a lot of mentorship, a lot of people being in community with me. I'm grateful for the collectives that I have been part of, and I have really been able to learn from those who have gone before me and been able to see that the fights that are fighting today, while they feel new and are here now, there are similar fights that were happening in the early 2000s. There are similar fights that were happening in the 90s, in the 70s. You can go back and you can see that the topic of today, gender backlash, is one that has always faced us, where there is progress, there has always been backlash that has faced it. And so it's been really useful for me to be able to speak to those to see what they have navigated beforehand, what has worked for them beforehand, and to learn from the strategies of my elders across different communities to say, okay, that's some really great perspective that I'm able to integrate and bring into my work. And so I just feel, because I'm so grateful for those who have gone before me, who have been able to bring me to the table, that I feel very much so that the UN is a very hierarchical thing, and it isn't something that I subscribe to. And I think there is so much, there are so many ideas. The work that I do, the push forward work, there's a lot of impactful strategies that are happening through youth groups and youth activists that they should be brought to the table. We should be hearing what they have to say. And so I feel the same way about younger women who are coming behind us. They don't need to wait their turn to be in the spotlight. They have really important things to say now. The way that they lead their lives, the way that they are, the challenges that they face, the innovations that are working for them. I think those be brought to the table. I remember very early on in my career, I was working with a senior woman leader who is a very dear confidant and mentor of mine still now. And I remember it was one of my first jobs after my master's, and in a roundtable, everybody was introducing themselves, and I introduced myself as I'm Jade, I'm just the intern, don't worry about me. And she stopped the meeting and she said, "You're not just the intern. There is never just the intern. You contribute so much here." And that moment stuck with me from 20 or so years ago, to also make sure that I give space to those women and young feminists of all genders and leaders everywhere, to make sure to give them their space and to invite them to come to the table too. So no, that was a bit more of a waffly answer, but I'm very much there for that.
So for our final question, Jade, I know we're running out of time, so this has been an incredible conversation. My last question for you is this. We're talking to a group of leaders, right? Who, even though we might not all work directly in this space, but we really care about institutional strength and fairness. What are one or two practical steps that we could take right now that you would recommend?
So, my message to those leaders, including those who don't work on gender equality, is that you're already making decisions every day, whether this is about resources, whether it's about the people that you work with, whether it's about the power that you may hold or the rooms that you're going into. And if we run some of those decisions through a simple equality lens, we can see that there is huge opportunity to directly strengthen your institution, and in the aggregate of that, the resilience of our democracies. So I would say some of the things that we can do is create conditions for participation and accountability. It's really quite the bread and butter of my work. But by having spaces where people can speak up and to say, this is their 2 cents, this is how they experience a challenge that the conversation is designing around, the decision is going to be that much more robust, because it bears in mind the lived experiences and challenges of an intersectional group of people, which is something that would make your decision much more robust and sustainable. I would say broaden those who lead. Similar to that last question, diverse leadership strengthens institutions, and that includes the perspectives of younger people today. Look at a few more statistics that I could share is that right now we only have 25 countries that are led by women out of 193. Of parliamentary seats around the world, only 27% of them are held by women. Of cabinet ministers around the world, only 22% of them are women. Now, as far as I'm aware, women are 50% of the population, so that we have such few positions of leadership, and the same is across in our business sectors and in our universities too. So I say let's treat those figures as like a leadership pipeline challenge. So back to that last question, let's coach, let's sponsor, let's promote, and let's try to identify and remove some of those systematic barriers that are preventing getting a more kind of diverse group of views into our structures, and practice coalition leadership. Look at complex problems. They need complex solutions that are cross-sector. So speak to those to build in connective tissue, and look to see that you do that work in coalition too. So I would say here, it sounds like the people who are in this room You're developing the skills here at UB, this analytical thinking, intercultural collaboration, reflective practice, evidence-based decision making. I'm glad to hear that these are some of the things that you as an institution are thinking of. I think that you're all on the right track for that. And the more that we can have of that coming into this line of work, whether it be in the academy, the business sector, government, whether that be local government or at the international stages that we're at, we need that kind of set of skills together. So you don't need to be a gender specialist to strengthen equality. You don't need to be a gender specialist to strengthen institutions. We need to have the kind of leaders that treat inclusion, accountability, and transparency as core to all of our joint goals across the way. And I would say that's the kind of leadership profile. The moment that we are in, that I opened with, that's the kind of leadership that we're looking for and would meet the moment of today.
Thank you so much, Jade. This was an incredibly insightful conversation. We're so grateful that you spent the time with us today and we were able to dig into that, not only theory and all the pieces behind it, but what we can actually do to help support this journey. I'm going to invite all of you to please join us for our next 12 months of leadership. We're going to be joined by Don Sandell. We're going to be talking about the power of positivity. Join us on Monday, April 6th, where we're going to be digging in on that conversation. And come meet Jade. Come have an opportunity to hear from Jade in person and to get to dig into this conversation even more deeply. On April 23rd, we'll be at our Center for Leadership and Global Impact Conference at the Buffalo Niagara Marriott. Scan this QR code, sign up now. There's a lot of opportunities to get involved with the center, but we'd love to see all of you in person and to be able to have that in-person convening. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for being a part of this conversation, and we will see you next time.
And
Thanks,
look forward
everyone.
I look forward to
Thank you.
meeting any of you at the conference. And if anybody would like to reach out, feel free to connect with me over LinkedIn. I'd be happy to follow up with any other questions that you might have. And thanks so much to the University of Buffalo for inviting me today. Thank you so much, Celine, Dorothy, and Maddie.
Thank you, Jade. Thanks all.